we can do because it doesn't work. Is there anything to connect it from here with my laptop or so? Because in this way the talk will take 2 hours.
Laptopnya nggak presentasi, nggak connect. Ini nggak bisa next. Nah, dia mau laptop sendiri. Nggak connect.
No, this is mine.
Salah lagi kata connect. Outline-nya jelas. Wow,
Fantastic. Okay, starting again. So, I told you about
Jelaskan
the title.
secara langsung kok,
I told you about the agenda.
Tapi wifi-nya
And I want to start
yang
with
gunain
some,
wifi ini nge-lag.
let's say, critical, reflective thoughts about where the world is. Sustainability risk in the beginning of the Anthropocene. So there's a big debate, especially in geological societies, whether the world is going to a new age. And they call it the Anthropocene, the man-made epoch of the world. It's still not officially accepted, but the people think with the beginning of the 21st century, humankind became the most global influencing factor in the system Earth. Mankind became able to change the climate, the streams in the oceans. There are so many risks that we are faced because of human action, but since when? There's a lot of discussion about when the Anthropocene starts. Some people say it starts in the middle of the 19th century in Europe with the beginning industrialization. This is a point of view coming from the climate change point of view. A sharp point is the July 1945. Mankind fulfilled a dream since they had since medieval ages. Mankind became able to transform elements into other elements. Unfortunately, they did it via nuclear bombs. So since medieval ages, chemists were dreaming to take iron and make gold of it. It's still not possible. But with the nuclear bombs, we brought new elements, new isotopes into the system Earth. This is a quite sharp point. Maybe the Anthropocene started in 1945. Maybe it started somewhere in the 1980s and people became aware that we are exhausting so many climate-relevant gases that we are changing the system Earth totally, and we do not exactly know what will be the effects. But in Europe, for example, there's a lot of discussion what will happen if the Gulf Stream from New Mexico is no longer coming across the Atlantic Ocean. The climate in Europe will dramatically change. And this is a lot of effects, like sea level rise, and I know this is a problem in Indonesia, because you have so many islands, you have so many regions near the oceans, which are, like my hometown, is lying below zero sea level. And there are places which are only maybe 1 meter or half a meter above sea level, and the sea level rises. It's not only a problem for Indonesia, but also Pacific Island countries. Bangladesh is a big example for that, because many people, on good reasons, like to live along the coasts. And so the Anthropocene is a challenge. As I said, it's not officially accepted, but more and more people believing that this is to come. This has to do with the idea that the Earth system has some limits, some boundaries. And this is a concept from the Stockholm Resilience Center in Stockholm, in Sweden, 1990. Okay, on the top, global warming. This is the one everyone knows. So the people think if we are still in a climate change within 1 degree, the world will find its balance again, nothing really harmful will happen. You see a red circle, this is a 2-degree circle. And they say if it's up to 2 degrees, there's a certain risk that the risk might be to handle. And above the red circle, we see there's a space where you see there is definitely a high risk of change, but no one knows whether this can be turned back. And you saw in 1990, the climate change was still in the green part. In 2015, it was around 1.4 degrees, so it's yellow. And you see there are other planetary boundaries like the biochemical flows, which means the nitrogen and the phosphate flows into the environment. They were running still red, would be the nitrogen in 1990, and dark red in 2015. And we have a lot of other problems like losing biosphere integrity by losing genetic and functional diversity. This was even a problem from the beginning. The only good story in that is if you look on the right side, we had a big problem, especially in the southern hemisphere, with the ozone hole. And this was a big problem in 1990. And the good story to tell is that the world did one thing together. They released the Montreal Protocol in 1987 to ban all hydrocarbons. I always have to think because in Germany they changed the order of the letters. In Germany they have Fluorchlorkohlwasserstoffe. And with the ban of these substances, the ozone hole started to decrease. So the ozone layer started to repair itself. 2015 is almost 10 years ago. What's now? In the latest chart that I found from 2022, and it's continuously updated, but 2022 is not so long ago, you see the biochemical flows are now dark red. The biosphere integrity is still dark red. Okay, ozone is good. Climate change continues. They worked on new things, like on the question of water. Green water, the drinking water, became red. In the previous slide, there was nothing in novel entities. Maybe you all know what novel entities is. Novel entities are synthetic chemicals that are not nature identical. And we all use them every day. Fragrances, pharmaceuticals, the farmers use pesticides, we use them for coloring of clothes and so on. Not the traditional batik here in Indonesia, but the industrial things that we have in the world market. And it's dark red. So we're bringing in too many things into the environment that the environment has no answer to. They cannot be degraded. So we are going into a big problem. And this problem was acknowledged coming from the 1970s. There was a report called The Limits to Growth by the Club of Rome, Meadows and others. And then it was acknowledged by the world community, especially in the so-called Brundtland report, Our Common Future, led by Gro Harlem Brundtland. She's a worldwide known politician by that time from Norway. And they said we have to rethink our doing. The world comes to its limit, so we have to change our behavior. And they defined something that is called sustainability. Although this term sustainability exists since the 18th century. But they said we need some kind of a sustainable development that meets our needs, the present generation, without compromising the needs of future generations, our children, grandchildren, or those people living in 2200. These great challenges are almost global challenges, like climate change. Things like globalization and migration, which are introduced by climate change. We have a lot of refugees in Germany, some from Syria or Ukraine become of war. Those people from Africa mainly coming because of reasons they cannot live anymore in the regions they are originally from, because desertification of the Sahara continues increasing. That means we need a different thinking. The roots of sustainability, as I said, are somewhere at least in Europe, in the 18th and early 19th century. So this is where Europe were quite prosperous, started growing, and the Industrial Revolution arrived on the horizon. And people were cutting a lot of forests. And we had examples even in ancient times. The small island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean was the richest island on forests in the Roman time, the Greek and Roman time. And then they found something on the island which is copper ore. And this is why Cyprus is called Cyprus, because of cuprum, copper. And then they cut all the trees to make charcoal to win the copper. I've got friends on Cyprus. I was teaching in the University of Cyprus many times. It's now one of the islands still, 2,000 years later in the Mediterranean, has the lowest degree on forest still. Nature never covered this island again with forest, only the Trollos Mountains. Nevertheless, it's a very nice place to go if you ever have the chance. I like this island. So it was defined by Karlowitz in Germany, for example, that if you want to have a forest, cut only so many trees that can grow at the same time. So if you go to a bamboo forest, you can cut many, many trees because they are growing so fast. If you have an oak tree forest, where an oak tree of this size takes 200 years to grow, maybe you can take one out of the whole forest per year. And this is not only a thinking to keep the environment, it's also to keep the economy. Because if the forest is used in an economic means, if it's gone, it's gone. And it goes further. My friend Robbie, sitting there, he worked with me in Bremen on the Badui community in Western Java. If you cut their forest, they will lose their environment, they will lose their economic base, their agricultural base, and after a few years they will disappear. They will go to Jakarta, to Malang, to everywhere, and their culture will be lost. Their language, their poems, their music, their traditions. This is what we saw in many places, for example, in the Amazonas forest. In the moment that the forest is gone, the culture is gone. So there's a debate what belongs to sustainability, and in the Agenda 21 in the 1990s, the United Nations defined we need ecological, economic, and societal sustainability. There's still a debate whether these are equally important, whether we need a balance, whether there's a list of priorities, and so on. With this debate, there were other things more pronouncing further aspects of sustainability, like cultural sustainability and institutional sustainability, and indigenous people are a good example, because they will lose their tribe structure that is centuries old, and they lose their culture. And maybe this is the biggest loss that we can have to losing culture or cultures. So, first going from the Agenda 21, in 2015 the United Nations issued the Agenda 2030 and the so-called Sustainable Development Goals. And it skipped a lot of things in between, the Millennium Goals, the Millennium Development Goals, and so on. But this is what we have for the moment. Almost the whole world agreed on 17 global aims, goals to achieve from now on in less than 6 years. Yeah, 2024, 2030 is to see. And we have interesting things to see, like things making human life a real life. No poverty and zero hunger, for example. There are some things looking on the environment, like climate action, life below water, life on land. There are institutional gains, like responsible consumption or cooperation for peace, functional institutions, gender equality. They do not say gender equity, they say gender equality, because there can be different solutions. For us here, number 4 is very important, quality education. And this starts with very simple things. To allow everyone to attend the school, to allow every girl to attend the school, which is good in our country, good in your country, but not look on Afghanistan, what's happening there in the moment. There are many countries where girls or young women do not have access to higher education, be it on political reasons or economical reasons. And the Stockholm people, who are very clever from my perspective, they developed something they called the wedding cake. And they said, these goals are not equal. There is some hierarchy in sustainability thinking. And they issued this wedding cake, Skudev and Rockström, and it's just a wedding cake because it's looked like a wedding cake with different things. I don't know how it is in Indonesia, but in Europe and US, it's very typical to have these wedding cakes with different. I had some like that when I married my wife as well. You see, nothing in the economy has anything in count if there's not a functioning society. And a functioning society cannot live well alive if there's not integrity in the biosphere. So the biosphere, climate action, life below water, life on land, and clean water supply is the absolute essential base in which a society can live a healthy life. Then they need no poverty, no hunger, good education, and so on. And this is all only served by the society. One may think this is some logic self-evident, but if you're looking to the United States these days and looking on Donald Trump, he would put everything around. He said, the economy is everything, society, okay, there are some workers, who cares the environment? Let's do fracking, crude oil exploitation. Climate change does not exist. You can feel what I'm thinking about. And this led to many actions. One of them is the action of the United Nations Environmental Program, and in 2019 onwards, I had the big honor to work on a document for the United Nations, the Global Chemicals Outlook #2, and say there is a global goal, and the chemists say that about themselves. There are different reports on biodiversity, the Global Biodiversity Outlook, the Global Climate Outlook, and so on. There are many reports like that. So we have to minimize the impacts of chemicals and waste. Carbon dioxide is considered as a waste by 2020. 2020 is gone already. Solutions exist, but more ambitious worldwide action by all stakeholders urgently required. And this leads to us as being educators, teachers, teacher trainers, university teachers, and so on. Happen will only change if minds change. You will never change the mind of Donald Trump, whatever you do. You cannot even give him money to change his mind. You will not change his mind. But the young generation, our kids, in school, in high school, in the university, these are the agents for change. And these are the people who have to live with the consequences. I'm over 50. I have maybe, lucky I have 20 years more. But those who are now 10, hopefully they have 70 years more. And so we have to look what's going on, and this document, there was a Global Chemicals Outlook #1. This is why there's a #2. And one of the biggest change was there was a chapter 4.1 added that was to reflect about changing chemistry to green and sustainable chemistry. And my friend Vanya from Brazil and I were asked to be the leading authors for that. And we wrote so many things, and since we are both engaged in education, we wrote so many things about education in the change of chemistry and physics and biology, but concentrated on chemistry. This was our task. So in the end, Klaus and the leading team of these reports said, this is too long, make 2 chapters out of it. So we were allowed to write 1 chapter about envisioning and shaping the future of chemistry as a green and sustainable chemistry, but also to give perspectives what chemists, people working in chemistry-related professions, but also responsible citizens have to learn about chemistry to make responsible use of chemistry. And I'm talking about chemistry because I'm from chemistry. You can say the same about biotechnology, about engineering, energy technology, which more relates to physics, and gene engineering, which belongs more to biology and so on. This was already acknowledged in the late 20th century, in the Agenda 21, where the United Nations said education is critical for promoting sustainable development. it's a key factor. The capacity of people is needed to address environment and development issues with a sustainability view. And this is also run down in the Sustainable Development Goals. I talked about 4.1 to 3. There's also 4.7 instead, that within the next 6 years, by that time it was 15, but we lost almost 10 for that, we have to ensure that learners acquire knowledge and skill needed to promote sustainable development, among others through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, but they also mention things like human rights, gender equality, culture of peace. 2005 to 14, I had some project in that, and they said, we need to invest in projects, in restructuring of schools and universities, to work more on sustainability. All levels of education need to be there, from pre-primary to lifelong learning. We have to address those people who are no longer in the educational system, the lifelong learners. PRESS is a project for teacher education, pre-service teacher education, but we also need in-service professional development for teachers on that. And a lot of these things are connected to the science and STEM fields. And there are a lot of definitions for that. For example, that ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, should enable learner for active participation in society with skills like analyzing, evaluating, reorient life, start processes, be active, get actions on that. Transfer 21, by the way, is the German World Decade Framework for the United Nations Decade. So we have to think on more holistic thinking science, not only learn the science content and the concepts and the mathematical equations behind, but we have to go into interdisciplinary thinking, system thinking, in knowledge and skills that are important to reshape or transform our society. And then it's again coming back to shaping like an ecological, compatible, economic, powerful, and socially fair environment. Wow, sounds like a dream. A friend of mine was 6 weeks with Fulbright in Bremen recently. He left last but one Friday. He's working at the University of California, Davis. And I opted for it. He said, this is like a prayer, like a poem to him. I said, yes, he's right. He's a good friend of mine for many years. And he was really a teacher of general chemistry. He was only teaching general chemistry. Research was on conceptual learning and problem solving. And then I infected him. And now all the things he's doing is implementing the SDGs into general chemistry in the US by different concepts, project. He was working with my students in Bremen on phosphate recovery, on fracking. In the moment we're working on critical raw materials. I'll come back to that in just maybe 6 minutes or 7 minutes. Okay, what can we do? Mareike, one of my PhD students, she made her PhD around 10 years ago. She did a lot of analysis before starting, developing a course on education for sustainable development for pre-service chemistry teachers. And I just finished this course a week ago. Last Monday was the last session for the second year bachelor students to become a chemistry teacher. We're still teaching that. And to prepare the course, Mareike did a large literature review that we are luckily were able to publish together with Franz Rau from Klagenfurt. He's with us here, you see his name on the bottom. And the first thing what we said is, we have to change ourselves as being teachers. We should change our practical work in schools towards green chemistry, sustainable chemistry practices. So we can replace poisonous substances by less poisonous substances. Change solvents. Use alternative forms of energy use, and so on. Reduce energy use. And reduce waste, for example. Students can learn how to compare traditional practices with new practices and develop general skills on that. So we created also a project around the year 2010, Marika and I. So Marika is also here, and you see her name. This was the so-called SALIS project. And you know this cooperation that we have in the PRESS family lasted along on different tracks. Maya, don't worry, there will also be a paper from you. So we created something like the PRESS project. It was by that time it was called Campus, which is now Erasmus+. So we worked together with Georgia, with Israel, and with Moldova to develop a course on student active learning in science by the use of low-cost and micro-scale lab techniques. So replacing the 200 euro Hoffmann apparatus by €1 made of plastic syringes, using electrochemical equipment like an old Coca-Cola can, or using these syringe techniques, going down to micro scale, not cooking everything in 100 milliliter flask, but in 10 milliliter, or even in a small glass on the micro scale. But you only learn that practice is changing, but not what's really happening. So this model 2 that Mareike found was making green and sustainable chemistry and technology explicit content in the curriculum, in the textbook, in the teaching. So applications of science should become part of the science learning, like how to use photovoltaics or wind energy plants to produce electricity, or how to make alternative reaction pathways in the chemistry, or how to use algae in biotechnology from a biological perspective to produce fuels. This is suggested to make the science learning more motivating and meaningful, but it stops on the learning of the content. Nevertheless, we created a project with one teacher. He's an in-service teacher, Michael Linkwitz, from a grammar school near Cologne, and he developed his whole first year of upper secondary education into a green chemistry course. He took all the content from the curriculum, but approached this with his students to the lens of green chemistry, and within half a year, he touched all the principles of green chemistry from Anastas and Warner, like using renewable resources, using the microwave to induce experiments, using catalysis, especially heterogeneous catalysis, especially enzymatic catalysis, looking on biodegradable polymer synthesis, and so on. So we come to model number 3. Model number 3 is that what I'm working on since 1998, so it's quite a while, social scientific issues-based science education. Really taking the issues from society, maybe the sustainability ones, and make them the driver of the curriculum. Climate change, the question of new fuels, risk and chances of pesticides, and so on. So the lessons are not only contextualized, but you also talk about the implications for our life now and in the future. So SSI teaching reflects not only the science behind such an issue, but also the question, for example, who decides about that? These are not the scientists. They only provide the knowledge. These are politicians, media people, influencers, NGOs, pressure groups, industry, and so on. So I do not know whether you ever thought about phosphate if you're from chemistry or biology. It's one of the most boring ions in the world. You cannot do really chemistry with it. For the biologists, they know it's absolutely essential as a fertilizer. And we created a project, Phosphorus, a political element in transdisciplinary chemistry education. And this was one done with Özcan Gulaka, my friend from California. It's a critical resource. Phosphate is very critical because 80% of the world reserves are in Morocco and Africa. But it's absolutely essential. So we need it. The question is, where does it come from? The solution might be this project, which is about phosphate recycling, phosphate recovery. I do not know whether you know that you all are the richest source of phosphates. Every one of us gives 1 to 2 grams phosphate every day to the toilet. So the EU decided that in the next 10 years, we should at least recover 40% of that. some countries even wanted to have 80. And so we created a learning environment where the students learn about the importance of phosphate for plant growth. They make some experiments with some cress plants and so. This is the left circle. And then they go into a lab session where they mimic industrial process of phosphate recovery. They are under development now. Some of them are installed. And you get a pure phosphate fertilizer out of the wastewater. And still debate whether we should do it because it costs money. And you can learn a lot about that. On the right side, you see a world about, for example, Morocco. We are not allowed to import from Morocco, but we do. Because they take it from a region which is called West Sahara, which is enacted by Morocco, but not accepted by the United Nations. There's a story about Nauru, not far from here, somewhere west of Australia. They were the richest country in the world in the 1980s. And they sold out all the guano that they had. Now they are placed third in another category, in the body mass index, because they forgot to learn. They were released from New Zealand in independence in the 1970s. Now they decided to go back to New Zealand to ask for help, for supervision, and so on, what to do with these people. Of course, it's small. There are a lot of things behind phosphate, like critical resources, like streams of chemicals, dependencies, and there are much more stories behind to tell this learning environment for students, and we made a spin-off for the general chemistry course in UC Davis in California. The last thing that we found is to change school life towards ESD goals. So reform schools, infrastructures to focus on interdisciplinary knowledge, participatory learning to be able to participate in the democratic society. This is maybe something in the broadest means, and it asks schools to open schools towards outside partners. Maria, jetzt ist now on you. So we are working on, especially in Finland, but we do also something like that, making networks of schools and connecting them to non-formal educational sites like universities, like museums, like zoos. We will go to a sea turtle rescue on Thursday, I think. Thursday. It's also part of the project to work with non-formal educational partners. And what we are doing, for example, we offered a lot of courses for students on sustainability topics, where we prepare teachers to prepare the students in school. Then they come to the university for half a day to do a lab session, often with equipment and materials not available in this amount and this quality like in schools. If they have time in the afternoon, they can visit either the Universal Science Center on the campus or a laboratory, a real research laboratory. And then there's some follow-up. And there are some schools in our surrounding who make it a school life. There's a new school, the new comprehensive school Schwachhausen. They will start in August with grade 5, and then we will be built up. And they have a stream called research teaching. And they had been in my office about 2 months ago and asked, can we come with our students to your lab regularly? Can we do something with you? Can we make use of the labs in the university? And since the school is on the campus, the students only have to walk maybe 5 to 10 minutes from the school building into our building, which is on the other end of the campus, and do some things with us. Of course, these different approaches have different potentials. Change in your practice, okay, you contribute a little bit to sustainable development. Learning about only by reflection. Adding the content only is only learning about. Learning in an SSI mode means learning about, but also for, because you learn how to participate. If there's elections, if there are votings for certain technologies, whether to engage in an NGO or a political party. Of course, Model 4 is the one that leads you to complete changes in schools, eco schools, who have solar panels on the roof, who change the way of eating in the Mensa restaurant, who get different energy contracts, different heating systems, and so on. All these are different facets that we are talking about in our PRESS project. So, what is a PRESS project? In fact, this is a press project, because this is our consortium. A lot of people are here. I don't know whether this does not work here with it. So you will see some people here in the room, like Bobby I see, like Nida is somewhere in the back, Marita is standing in the back. I'm somewhere in the middle, here to my friend Ahmad, he's from the Arab College in Israel. On the left side you see the most important person in the project, because this is
Prof Yayu apa setelah?
and she's holding my bag free from all the reporting stuff and so,
Prof kan
and
Jepang
helps
buat
me a lot
Jerman
to
ke
coordinate
Jerman.
the project. This was a kick-off meeting at the University of Bremen a bit more than a year ago, and so we met to plan the project. What do we do? What is the EU giving us the money for? So this is a document we uploaded already last week. This is the press model curriculum and syllabus. So our task is to develop press courses, a course module of 3 CP at least, in the Indonesian partner universities, in the Israeli partner colleges, and in the Georgian. Oh, it starts raining. It starts in Georgia Institute, University of Partners in Georgia. It's one term with at least 14 sessions. We defined exactly what to do. Today you will hear part of the session, so there will be an introduction to these key concepts. There will be something about networking, about project-based learning, and so on. There will be students' projects in the second half of the course, where student teachers are asked to work with schools and non-formal partners like small and medium enterprises, non-formal education partners, develop a project for sustainability. There will be exhibitions on that on the campus, and this should be held every year. And aside, we try about our aims to influence as many as possible people. So this is a workshop I gave here in another building last October, and there were 250 student teachers, female and 10 male. Interesting. And so we also try, besides the press courses, to affect other people, to roll out of our subjects, to provide events like here on Friday, to invite teachers, to invite people who do not have the chance like here. I know that many of you, Nina, for example, she's not in a press partner university from Yogyakarta, she's coming to hear what we are doing, and you're warmly welcome to go on the website. At a certain point, the materials will be there. You can use whatever you like in your courses. So the idea is to spread it beyond the 9 partner universities and make it official. There will be a press toolkit coming in, we have to submit, I think, in November. So it will be on the website maybe in November or December with PowerPoint presentations, with information, with tasks, with ideas, with web resources, with literature resources for every of the course session. The benefits: I was in Indonesia, I'm again in Indonesia, I had a good time. I was in Serang before, Robbie gave me a good time, I'm sure I will have.
Musical jungle.
So for us the benefit is making new networks, seeing new people, meeting new people, making new contacts. This is maybe more important on the longer run, because we already started on the coach to the airport in Serang to Jakarta, talking about maybe a future project after press. Press will end in November next year. We will have a final conference in Georgia before in September, August or September? Beginning of September. And you are invited to become part of it if you want. There's a website, pressproject.eu. Unfortunately, Nadia is not here. Nadia is our social media professional, and she has our Instagram account at pressproject.eu. So all the nice pictures that we did in last week in Serang, this week, I will stay in until next week. We will upload a lot of things, but they will not come in synchronous in time because Nadia, she had some health problems. They are not solved since last week, so she decided to go out a few days of vacation with her boyfriend who's a teacher because school year starting then again in Germany and he has to teach. But from July 15, I will be back, Nadia will be back. We will upload a lot of live present from the sea turtles and from other things that we make pictures of, from this group, of course, and so on. What does it make to the students? I told you about Michael. Michael is a teacher. I think he's 1 year younger than me. He finished his PhD 2.5 years ago. So he made a PhD in my group on the job. Full-time teacher, vice headmaster, working on a PhD. Luckily, his wife agreed to that, and his daughter is not that young, so he was able to finish that. And he made some studies about that, and as I told you, he's the one implementing the green chemistry into secondary chemistry teaching. He did it in the upper secondary level, now he's trying to go down and down. Grade 9, grade 8, what can we do even with younger ones? And we have some promising things, but these are some student voices from the course he gave. So he gave the course in the first half of grade 11, and then about a year later, he sent a Teams request to these students. What do you think in retrospective 1 year later about the change in the curriculum? And there are 3 slides. For every slide, I give you a few minutes to read. I will not read it aloud because you can read on your own. Normally, chemistry is not the subject the students like most. They like it a lot when it's in grade 5 to 7. And then when we come to atomic structure bonding, the complex things, we are losing a lot of them. Maybe sustainability is the context to getting them back, or to keeping their interest, especially those who are not intrinsically interested in chemistry. That they see that chemistry is important. I could say the same for physics. Biology does not have this problem so much. But modern biology, microbiology, biotechnology, genetics engineering are very, very complex topics. And when it comes in biology to these topics in the higher grades, it's the same effect. We are losing the students because they do not see why they should know about it. In the younger grades, when they talk about the pet at home, the lake in front of the school, and so it's very near, authentic, and motivating, but later biology faces the same problem like chemistry and physics. Okay, I come to an end. The world is under risk in different respects. It's under risk in political terms because of the tensions between the West and Russia, between the US and China, maybe from November between the US and Western Europe when Trump comes back. I know that there's a lot of trouble here between Indonesia, Malaysia, China, Taiwan, a lot of tensions. So there are big risks in the world. But these are political things scientists cannot do much about. But we are under risk in our environment, in our climate, in our oceans, in our land use, in our water supply. My actual Indonesian student, Himat from Kudus, he chose the topic of water education, water literacy. How to deal with water. There's so many countries having scarcity on water. Indonesia has plenty of water, but not all the water can be used. There are concepts of green water, blue water, gray water, contaminated water. So we need changes in our behavior, in our consumption and lifestyles, and this should be done on an informed base, and education is the base for that. But for many of the problems we have, we only can find solutions if we want to keep our life, or even solutions in science and technology. So that we need to educate our young generation to know about the chances and risks and their opportunities to act. I'm working for the Federal Ministry of Education in Germany, and they always say, if you do as ESD without an action perspective, it's not really ESD. So there should be something that one can do. Changing behavior towards more organic food, eating more regional food, avoid eating food that has to be flown in, like strawberries in our winter that come from Australia or New Zealand. What a stupid thing. At the moment we can eat strawberries as much as we want because it's a strawberry season in Germany, just now. One answer for that is implementing ESD. ESD is a concept that was defined as a political goal in the 1990s, but became in the last 20, 30 years a very well justified educational concept. I wrote several articles and book chapters with my friend Jesper Sjöström from Malmö in Sweden about the question what makes critical scientific literacy based on concepts like Allgemeinbildung, which is a central Northern European concept, which means the aim of education is to enable students to fulfill a self-determined life with a chance of participation in society and a respect of others with solidarity. This was defined by Wolfgang Kluck in the 60s, an overarching aim of education. And yes, I made a lot of reflection what science and STEM education can contribute to that. This is the one way. The other way is that we learned of implementing this kind of stuff for almost 30 years now, or 25 years now. It solves many of our other problems. Science learning, especially in chemistry and physics, is perceived by students as irrelevant, as boring, as too theoretical. You just say, why should I learn that? I cannot do anything with it. Implementing ESD into STEM education fields can make science education more authentic, more relevant, more meaningful. And we know if we have these components, it gets more motivating for students to learn, but maybe also to stay, not to skip at the first potential point. In Germany, it's grade 12, all the science from their agenda. So there's hope that ESD maybe even solves the motivation problem in science education. As I said, in biology, it's not so strong as it is in physics and in chemistry. So we should understand ESD as a driver for curriculum reform. And the press project wants to give it another push. I've learned there's a lot of fear in Indonesia, SSI, sustainability, a lot of discussions, but we want to give it another push. In Malang, in Serang, in other places, on Java, but also on the other islands, Sumatra, Borneo, and so on. Unfortunately, I've never been there, but maybe once there's a chance to go. Okay, on Bali I was, this was nice as well. Okay, so this is the introduction. I have two last slides. One I have to give. A lot of the works I presented were funded by the German Federal Trust of the Environment. They gave us several million euros for different projects on phosphate recovery and on the non-formal labs and so. Of course, I'm acknowledging the funding of the European Union. We had a couple of projects. I mentioned the SALIS project, the ARTIS project, the Prof project, the TELI project, and the PRESS project, of course. And here you see a list of my PhD students, at least those who worked on sustainability issues, among them Vida and Robbie, but also a student from China. And as I said, I have another one from Indonesia working on that, one in Italy and one in Greece, and those ones staying with me in Bremen. Thank you with a view on Bremen's marketplace. Some of you might remember who have been there. Bremen's town hall, the cathedral, It's a Roland statue. It's a monument of UNESCO World Cultural Heritage because this mayor's house in its present form is more than 600 years old. Very traditional style. And maybe some of you have heard about the tale of the Bremen town musicians. If not, you should Google it.